Chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Tuesday, August 13th. Last night, Donald Trump and Elon Musk sat down for nearly 2 hours in the interview on X. And here to break down the highlights for us is Danielle D'Souza Gill, a member of the advisory board for Women for Trump, and Seth Dillon, the CEO of the Babylon Bee. So Seth, let's start with you. Elon Musk bought Twitter in part to bring back the Babylon Bee. So I want to just start with a 30,000-foot view with you. And what has transpired over the last 2 years in terms of free speech now that we see all of these events going on with Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
Well, it's really interesting. I don't take full credit, by the way, for him buying Twitter. I think the Babylon Bee was just one of several egregious examples of how people weren't allowed to speak freely on that platform. We made a joke that we weren't supposed to make. We joked that Rachel Levine was our pick for Man of the Year, and that was considered hateful conduct. And he just couldn't believe that we got suspended and that you weren't allowed to tell jokes, especially jokes that have the truth, rooted in them. And he saw that as very problematic, and he was absolutely right about that. Something needed to be done about it. You had all of these platforms where basically colluding with each other and with the government to present certain narratives and to suppress information and disfavored viewpoints that they didn't like. And so if we talk about the whole conversation about preserving democracy and keeping democracy safe, well, you have to have free speech. You have to have people willing to have debates, or else you can't even get to the truth about these issues. And so Musk saw the importance of that, was thankfully willing to pay a massive price for Twitter and to restore free speech in the public square. And now we have it. We have a lot more speech. We have viewpoints. The Bee is safe now. We can tell jokes on this platform. We don't have to worry about getting censored and suspended. It's the one place where we don't have to worry about that. And that provides for much more discourse rather than less. And the left hates that. I mean, they wanted to. I actually saw there was a reporter who was suggesting or asking the White House, the administration, what is your position on this? Like, what are you going to do about this misinformation? Is there anything that you can do to intervene to prevent misinformation from being spread in this discussion? It's like, wait a minute, you guys traffic in misinformation all the time, for one thing. But it's remarkable. And I love that Elon's using the platform to have conversations like that. And I'm sure he'd be willing to have conversations with the other side, too.
Yeah, no, it is remarkable, Seth. What do you say to liberals who say, Elon Musk, he's censoring people, he's, kind of joined up with Donald Trump to kind of put out all this misinformation? You mentioned that question that was asked of, White House press secretary. But of course, Elon Musk is using his platform for free speech. He's not censoring people the way the left is, the way Google is, YouTube, and all of this. Liberals are still on Twitter or X, as it's called, saying all of their thoughts. So what's kind of your response to whether or not Elon is using this as like a bully pulpit?
Well, they're mad that he's not censoring. They're mad that he actually gave Trump a platform to talk from. They're mad that he actually expresses his own viewpoints on this platform, and other people that they used to be able to suppress very easily are allowed to express themselves on this platform. So they're not actually mad about him censoring people. They're mad about him allowing free speech and actually exercising his own right to speak freely. But, when it comes to whether he's silencing his critics or whatever, I think most of that is absolute nonsense. He's the most criticized person on his own platform. And most of these people who are complaining about how much he censors are using his platform to complain about it, which I just find, richly ironic.
Seth, let's dive into the interview itself then. What were your biggest takeaways from the big conversation that happened last night?
Yeah, the conversation, more of a conversation than an interview, as Elon was saying himself. He wanted it to just be a presentation of who Trump is. And I think we got that. You just hear him talking and sharing his mind. And it started out with this conversation about the assassination attempt, which I find it fascinating when we actually get to hear from Trump on that himself and how he experienced that moment. I think it was a really interesting and wide-ranging conversation that allowed people to just kind of see who Trump is and what he thinks and why he believes what he believes without all of the gotcha questions, just getting hung up on all of these things where they try to pin him on something that he said, that they try to stuff words in his mouth and misconstrue a certain way to make him sound like a monster. Elon wasn't trying to make him sound like a monster. And I also didn't get the impression that Elon was trying to sell Trump to us. He was just trying to have a conversation with him, which I think he's well within his rights to do on his own platform, especially.
Yeah. Seth, do you think that ultimately, Trump doing a lot of podcast interviews, kind of doing cultural things like this, reaching out to a larger base, do you think that's ultimately going to have a pretty big impact on swing voters? How do you think the viewership was taken, and do you think it's going to make a pretty big difference?
I don't know. I don't know what the audience was made up of. I know that it got a lot more attention than the media wants us to think that it did. They try to act like it was just this nothing thing that had technical difficulties and no one was really tuning in or listening to it. And I love how they do that. Every time they try to suppress something and talk like it's no big deal or that it's dangerous and harmful, they just draw more attention to it and get more views. They've done that with us over the years. As for whether it's helpful, I mean, I think it can only be helpful when he engages and he's himself and he addresses the issues that matter to the American people. I think that's really helpful, especially at a time when you have, where's Kamala Harris? Where's President Biden? Where are they? You can't find them. They're not answering any questions. And so I think any voters who are sitting there thinking, who's actually speaking to the people and communicating what they want to do for this country and how they want to move us forward, you really only have one choice at this point. If you're actually trying to listen and hear what they have to say, there's only one person speaking.
When we look at what the American people are looking for, they want to have a future that they can believe in. Let's go ahead and take a listen to Donald Trump talking about how he wants to bring the American dream back.
They want the American dream back, more important than anything else. It's like you don't have that today because the people, they've been just sucked. They see incompetent people running the Biden thing is very interesting. People just found him to be incompetent. And when I debated him, I was like, is this for real?
Seth, what's your takeaway from that?
It's funny when he could have gone harder in that debate, like mocking Biden's inability to communicate. He was actually pretty gentle, I think, with Biden, because Biden was just struggling to get a sentence out. And there was at one point where he said, I didn't understand what he just said, and I don't think he understood what he just said. I don't think he even knows what he's talking about. I would have loved to have seen more than that because that was actually really entertaining. But I think he's right. The American people are struggling right now, and they want to hear about a path to a brighter future. They want to see the restoration of the American dream. I think that's absolutely true. A lot of them do anyway. A lot of them are perfectly happy to go down this downward spiral of woke madness and reality denial and all of that. But not speaking to those people, speaking to the broader public who may be on the fence about who they want to vote for in this election. I think that's a message that resonates.
Yeah, Seth, this interview was pretty lengthy. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, they had a long conversation. I don't think Kamala Harris could hold her own for so long. She rarely does any interviews, let alone something that is at that length. Do you think that
she can fill a word count, though?
She can do a word salad.
Saying things.
Yeah, I think they're trying to prevent a word salad from coming out from her, honestly. She could have said the same line that you said, or Trump could have said the same line where he says, do you even know what you're saying yourself? But right. Do you think Kamala Harris's strategy of doing a little bit of the Biden strategy, hiding in her basement, not doing these kinds of, lengthy interviews, what do you think about that strategy?
Well, it would ordinarily, I think, be extremely detrimental. But it's a couple of commentators have said, I think Vivek has said this and others, it's not a matter of running against an individual. You're running against the machine. And the leftist Democrat-run media machine is working extremely hard to generate enthusiasm for her, as if she's great, as if she doesn't just spew word salads, as if she actually has a platform and policies that she's promoting that make sense, that don't contradict something she just said 10 minutes ago or 10 years ago to a different audience. So I don't know. I mean, it's probably better the more she keeps her mouth shut, honestly, and lets the media just do the work for her. I think that does benefit her. It's probably a smart strategy, but I mean, I see right through it.
And it's a strategy that is going to keep you guys over there at the Babylon Bee very busy the rest of the way through this campaign season. It's pretty much the only thing that keeps me sane throughout this. So, Seth, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Kamala Harris may have an in at ABC. We'll tell you how it could affect the next presidential debate. We were talking about how Americans have been hurting financially under the Biden economy. And you know what? Healthcare costs are completely out of control right now. So government isn't the answer. So what is? You can turn to Lassie Health to shake things up. That's Lassie, Laasy. Now, the best part about it is Lassie Health isn't insurance. So you don't actually have to wait for the open enrollment period that is so annoying because it's at the end of the year when everybody is busy with the holidays. You can cut through all of that. And the best part about it is coverage starts at $30 a month. And it's not health insurance. So you're going to get covered for up to just $30 a month. And you get the transparent pricing, the comprehensive tailored coverage for your needs, what you're going to need for yourself and your family, even your business. Now, access to healthcare services without breaking the bank. Now, there's no annual or lifetime cap on list services. And the best part about it, like I said, you can start this plan at any time. And you can have over 400 prescriptions for free under this service. There's free unlimited virtual mental health counseling, free 24-hour virtual urgent care. And if you've been like me, if you've paid out of pocket before, you know the worst part is the lab testing and the images and all the procedures. Your lab testing could be up to 60% off, images up to 75% off, and procedures up to 50% off. So Lassie Health is a complete game changer. Check out the affordable plans that put you in control of your healthcare at healthlink.com/blaze for a limited time. You can get your first month free up to $100 off eligible plans. So get healthy, be healthy, and stay healthy without breaking the bank at healthlink.com/blaze. Next month, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are set to debate on ABC News. However, there is a potential conflict of interest. One of Kamala Harris's good friends, Dana Walden, is a senior Disney executive whose portfolio includes ABC News. Chris Bedford is the senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent for Blaze Media. And Chris, I mean, let's look at this. We've seen Democrats before hand over questions ahead of time and, do all sorts of shady things. So in terms of conflict of interest, how serious is this relationship?
I think it's about as serious as any that we've seen so far, and that's basically all of them, as you've said. Whether it's Democrats like George Stephanopoulos planting ridiculous questions to try to end up becoming campaign-defining issues, or these questions being leaked, or executives' close ties to the campaign. I mean, there's a story out this evening. It's a story in quotes from Axios saying, look at this, Kamala Harris's campaign is using our stories and Reuters stories and AP stories and making it seem like we endorse their campaign. Well, when you're actually putting out news reports that the campaign can use as part of its campaign materials, then maybe you're not really doing real reporting. And that's an issue. But this is not foreign at all to Donald Trump or the Trump campaign. It's not foreign to Republicans in any sense. Newt Gingrich did a great job masterfully attacking the press. Chris Christie did a similar job. And Donald Trump's been better than any of them at it by going in fully aware, not expecting a completely fair fight, and recognizing that these are the parameters that he'll have to go with. And that, fortunately for him, the press is not popular with the American people. So beating on them can lead to applause lines.
Chris, Donald Trump and Elon Musk had a great conversation last night on X. They did a lengthy interview. What was your reaction to the conversation? And do you think some of the points that President Trump made would be good points to bring up in a future debate with Kamala Harris?
Oh, yeah, some of them. I mean, it's a lot of the stuff that we've somewhat seen before from Donald Trump. It was a kind of a 2-hour he does this sort of a freestyling spoken word thing, and we saw a lot of that as well. Of course, the reiteration that he was going to return to Butler County, Pennsylvania could be something that is very interesting. And the tech issues that continue to plague these massive, and they are massive, live shows on X, of course, continues. That led to some negative headlines. I mean, the main shift that I think things like this represent is, one, Donald Trump's return to X, which is something that will give him a great reach once again. And two, the shifting sands in Silicon Valley and how all these outsider tech titan types who have traditionally been Democrats are starting to join the party of the GOP, or the party of Donald Trump, and starting to push back and no longer caring about the social stigmas that were previously so effectively attached to anyone who wanted to support Trump.
Well, we can't have nice things. And even though we had a great conversation with Donald Trump and Elon Musk yesterday, they were trying to stir things up at the White House with Karine Jean-Pierre before. So a Washington Post reporter was talking about misinformation on X. So let's go ahead and listen to that, because they were asking, what role does the White House have in all of this?
Elon Musk is slated to interview Donald Trump tonight on X. I don't know if the president is going to tune in. Feel free to say if he is or not. But I think that misinformation on Twitter is not just a campaign issue. It's a America issue. What role does the White House or the president have in sort of stopping that, or stopping the spread of that, or sort of intervening in that? Some of that was about campaign misinformation, but it's a wider thing, right?
Yeah, no, and you've heard us talk about this many times from here, about the responsibilities that social media platforms have when it comes to misinformation, disinformation. Don't have anything to read out from here about specific ways that we're working on it, but we believe that they have the responsibility. These are private companies, so we're also mindful of that too.
Chris, I don't know what's worse. Was the question or the answer worse in that case?
I would say the answer was worse in that case, but only because of this. The question has been one that we've now known for years. If you remember the first Obama press conference, or the first White House press conference after Donald Trump won the election in 2016, was filled with these shrill, skinny-armed reporters shaking their fists in the air saying, "What are you going to do about all this disinformation?" And it was an awkward scene to see Obama's White House press secretary at the time repeatedly having to remind them there's such a thing as the First Amendment, and that the White House can actually step in and crush dissent or knock down opinions that they don't like. The press have basically thought that for years now. What's changed, and has changed particularly under the Biden administration, is that the White House no longer shares that view on the First Amendment. They do actually believe that they should be coordinating with American intel assets and with private companies to censor speech, things that are politically inconvenient, science that pushes back against their COVID narratives. The list goes on, and they treat these things like they would treat a foreign enemy, hostile powers disinformation campaigns in America. So the press once again beclowns itself. It's such a silly question. But the dangerous aspect here is not the Washington Post, which has very little influence anymore outside of D.C., but the White House, which does have a lot of power.
Yeah, I know. It seems like the left is just hell-bent on censorship. They want to take down Donald Trump, it seems like, at really any means necessary. That's why I'm so excited about a debate, because I feel like then people can actually hear both sides. But what do you think about the media coverage of Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris? Because it is so incredibly biased. And so what do you think that has had as far as an impact on this, little bit of polling bump here?
Well, it's complete and total gaslighting, as you know. And it also exposes just how frightened and afraid the Kamala Harris campaign is. That little line in that sycophantic Time profile. Time magazine is that very thin magazine that's gone out of business multiple times. You can still sometimes buy at airports. And they put her on the cover and said it was just the greatest thing. It's her time. It's her age. And she wouldn't even sit down with them. That's how much they're hiding her. So it's going to be interesting. They're building up this bubble similar to the Wizard of Oz, the great Kamala Harris, something that they were unable to do for 4 years. If she was remotely good at her job, if she was funny, if she was intelligent, if she did the homework, if she was a good politician, then she would have been a star of the last administration, and the press would have made her a star. They tried to do it, but they failed, and they basically quickly gave up. Remember that slogan they always had of "Excuse me, I'm speaking"? I can't, or something like that from 2020. They tried to make her the new it thing, and it didn't work, so they had to get rid of it. They can hide her for the next couple months, but eventually she's going to have to say something, and that's going to be the danger, because there's been so much built up around her that anything she says will draw glaring comparisons. It's not unlike what we saw with Joe Biden and his debate performance, when they pretended everything was fine, and then it was really clear that it wasn't. Well, they got a lot more scrutiny than they otherwise would have if the room had been filled with the normal campaign noise.
Well, we know that they're going to try and keep Kamala out of the spotlight, out of interviews as much as possible, and just keep her away from the reporters. But right now, all we see is twerking and free concerts. We see very little of actual policy that's going out there right now. And even this week, they were saying that she was trying to push for no Medicare at all. And she actually co-sponsored the Medicare for All Act. So every time that we see her out there, it feels like she's lying to get elected.
And she is. And previously, the press might have called that a flip-flop, or they would have called it cynical politics, or they might have even called it lying, which a lot of it is. But to read the coverage of her shift from open borders, decriminalize illegal crossing, to we need to crack down, the reporters over at Playbook said it's been startling to watch her transformation. This is not a cynical political ploy with her. It's a transformation. It's like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon. She's abandoning all of her policies. She's abandoning even the policies of the current administration, which she is second in command of. And she's not even doing it publicly herself. She's doing it through either surrogates or through campaign spokespeople who aren't even named. All of these policies of hers that she's disowning, she's just doing it to the side. And we'll see. It's a last gasp in some ways of a corporate media that was chastened by 2016, empowered by what they were capable of doing with the zombie candidate in 2020, to see what they can just create with this blank canvas. This is Kamala Harris right now.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we know that she was the border czar. She clearly left the border open, and yet now she's trying to pretend like she's this prosecutor, like she's tough on crime. How do you think this is going to play out in a debate with Donald Trump? Because immigration is going to be one of his top issues to talk about. They're going to go head to head. It's going to be, just the two of them for the American people to see, aside from some of the, bias from the moderators and so on. So how do you think that's going to play out between the two of them on immigration?
Well, I suspect that if Donald Trump is capable of maintaining the sort of discipline that he showed during his debate with Joe Biden, and isn't seen stylistically as bullying or yelling over her, that he'll give her enough rope to hang herself, essentially. The word salads that she puts out, the empty political slogans that mean very little, those are the reasons that she wasn't able to garner any support in the 2016 Democratic primary. Those are the reasons why Gavin Newsom didn't want her to come back to California, even though she was the vice president, when he was in danger of being recalled by the voters. He didn't want her political support. Those are the reasons that she's not out there now. So if you put her on stage next to someone who is one of the better or more masterful political debaters of our time, all of those sorts of lies are going to be called out. And I think, just like with the Joe Biden debate, because there's such a shroud of secrecy around the whole Kamala Harris campaign, there's going to be a lot more people tuning in. People are going to want to see this title match. I predict that Washington, D.C. won't be the only place that has viewing parties in a night like that. You'll see it on at bars. You'll see it on at restaurants because it's entertaining. Donald Trump, for his many faults and his many pluses, has definitely made political debating a lot more entertaining.
Listen, Chris, it's a brat summer, and we're all just living in Kamala Harris's world. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about immigration when we come back, because Kamala Harris may be taking border advice from a dubious source. We'll explain coming up next. Back in June, Oklahoma State Superintendent of Public Instruction Ryan Walters announced that schools must incorporate the Bible into their curriculum. And since then, like you might imagine, he's faced some major criticism that's amassing into a lawsuit. But he has a recent piece up for Blaze News, and he joins us now to discuss it. So since you've issued all that memo, let's go into the Bible being taught in schools and why you think this is such an important thing to get done in the state of Oklahoma.
Yes, thank you for having me on. What we've seen in American history is since the 1960s, the U.S. Supreme Court has weaponized the government against religion. They have come after Christians. They've come after the Bible. They came after prayer in school. And what we've seen is our schools are lying to our kids. They have taken the Bible out of the classroom, and kids are told that Christianity and religion played no role in American history. Well, that's not true. Actually, it's academic malpractice to not have the Bible in the classroom, talking about its historical context throughout American history, going back to the Pilgrims, looking at where our rights come from. They come from God. That was what Americans believed at the passage of the Constitution. You go all the way through Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., talking about his letter from a Birmingham jail, referencing the Apostle Paul as an inspiration. The reality is the Bible is throughout American history, and it is time that the left gets called out and we put the Bible back where it belongs, in the classroom.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about this idea of separation of church and state? Because actually, separation of church and state is not in our Constitution. Can you maybe respond to some of these arguments that say, oh, you know, religion or Christianity has no place in our public square, in our public schools and so on, when actually the founders never intended for religion to be sequestered from our public spaces? Can you kind of debunk some of those arguments?
Oh, I appreciate that question very much. You know, what we've seen is this phrase that was taken from a letter from Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist, which meant actually the opposite of he wouldn't come in and use the government in a negative manner against religion. It doesn't really show up anywhere till you have the 1960s. They pull it up in Engel versus Vitale and some other court cases and say, you know, this means the founders meant for there to be this complete separation of church and state, which means we're going to now weaponize the government to drive out any mention of faith, any type of prayer, any type of biblical reference. Well, that's absurd. I mean, you can go back through American history and say, not only is it not in the founding, nobody is making this argument throughout American history until the 1960s, when you had the leftists taking over the court system and making these arguments. And again, I thought it was really funny a few weeks ago, the New York Times fact-checked me on this, and they had to admit that factually I am correct when I say that until the 1960s, your classrooms would have had a Bible in it. They said, yeah, he is factually correct. Most classrooms would have had a Bible in it until the 1960s. So what we're seeing is the reality is the Constitution was clear. The Declaration was clear. There was not meant to be this wall of separation between church and state. And the reality is we need to go back to those times because our kids need to understand the influence that Christianity and the Bible had in American history.
I love that you're in a red state in Oklahoma and you're acting like you're in a red state. And I want to know, have any other of your superiors or anybody else in other red states reached out to you and try to mimic what you're doing in Oklahoma right now?
Absolutely. You're going to see some other red states that are going to be launching similar initiatives soon. So we've got quite a good group here that we've been working together. And look, I think that Republicans have finally turned the corner in education. I don't know what the deal was, but for far too long, Republicans would kowtow and appease the teachers union and the most moderate positions. Well, let's just give education more money and hope the problems go away. Well, that was always a terrible position to take. And now we've finally seen Republicans turning the corner and playing offense. We've led the way here in Oklahoma. Get school choice, run the teachers unions out, put parents back in charge, bring the Bible back to the classroom. This is how you can start moving the needle in education. We also do performance pay. We use the free market in education. And guess what? These policies lead to better performance for students. It leads to a higher quality of life for adults as they continue to go through our education system. That's why you got to continue this fight, and we've got to continue to play offense.
Absolutely. We have to be on offense. And the crazy thing is our education system, I think, you know, President Trump talked a little bit about this yesterday with Elon Musk, is actually really suffering. And since we have removed the Bible from schools, since we've taken, Christianity away from kids, in many ways, they actually are suffering educationally, even aside from moral values. I mean, the Bible is a historical document. And so many kids don't actually learn these things anymore about history. Do you feel like putting this back in school will actually improve our education system?
I absolutely do. And it's part of this broader attack from the left. And what you see here is they've really created our schools, they've turned them into state-sponsored atheist centers where they say, listen, we're going to remove all mentions of God. And so you're only going to believe that, the Pilgrims came here for what reason? How do you even explain the Pilgrims risking their lives to come to America if you don't talk about their religion and frankly, how'd they get the name Pilgrims, right? But what you've seen is this push, and they've done it with all of our history. They don't want primary sources in the classroom. They don't want the Bible. They don't want the Constitution. They don't want the Declaration of Independence or the Federalist Papers. They only want kids to use these left-wing textbooks to read what some left-wing professor said about the founding documents. Well, it does two things. First of all, it allows them to indoctrinate your kids by telling them that, well, Thomas Jefferson actually meant this, when the plain reading of it would suggest otherwise. And number two, I'm going to tell you, That's why kids don't love history anymore. Let them read Thomas Jefferson's letters. Let them read the notes from the Constitutional Convention. It makes history come to life. It not only engages them in a way that they understand American history better, they actually believe in the country. They actually will become patriotic. They will actually find stories in history that inspire them. That's how you teach history. But the left has fought that because they want to lie to your kids and make them hate their country.
Well, Ryan, with everything that you're saying here and doing in the state of Oklahoma, it looked like you've upset all of the right people. So there's an investigation that could lead to a possible impeachment of you. And now our mutual friend, Steve Deace, went to X earlier today and wrote soft-headed Oklahoma rhinos about to make my man Ryan Walters a Ken Paxton level national folk hero. He said this would be political gold for him. So how do you respond to all of these people coming at you right now?
Hey, look, it's remarkable, right? You know, I've battled the Democrats, fought them. These are Republicans. These are rhino Republicans in our state that they take money from the teachers union. They have fought me on when I got porn out of schools. They fought me to keep genderqueer and flamer in the classroom. They fought me to keep transgenderism alive in the classroom. They fought me to keep school choice from our state. We were able to beat them in every way possible. I beat them in the election. I beat them with these policy initiatives. So what are they doing now? Shocker. They are trying to impeach me. It is the most, we've never seen anything like it in the state of Oklahoma. I mean, this would be the largest undermining of the vote of Oklahomans in state history to say, yeah, he was, I mean, by the way, I won a landslide election. I mean, I crushed my primary opponents. I crushed my runoff opponents. I crushed the general opponent. And for them to, these rhinos to come in and go, hold on, we've got to keep every last bit of power for the teachers unions. We're going to go after him. It's truly incredible. The lengths they will go to keep their union bosses in control.
It is so amazing, Ryan. I mean, I really think that the solution for Republicans is to go on offense. We do need to be acting, like red people in red states. What is your advice to people who are in your situation, who are in other states, who are maybe afraid of the blowback? They want to appease the rhinos, as we say. And what's kind of your model for them? Because in many ways, I feel like if you actually do follow, your principles, you follow the Bible and so on, you can have that courage to do these things that will actually improve our country and help kids for the whole next generation.
Absolutely. Listen, number one, I'd say appeasement doesn't work. Okay. If you got a lesson from history, appeasement doesn't work. Go back and read some Winston Churchill there for you. But appeasement does not work. What does work is a clear vision. You got to be really upfront with people. Look, here's what happened to education. Here's where we went wrong. This is one of the reasons I've had Democrats and our Republicans try to censor me so much because they don't want me to talk to the public about what's happening. So you got to make sure people are engaged and understand it. Then go do it. Initiate the policies. Get them across the finish line. Our policies work. If you can institutionalize conservative policies, then the public will continue to see that these policies lead to a better quality of life. They lead to better student outcomes. They lead to more parental engagement in education. They lead to kids loving their country more. They lead to more patriotism. But you have to get them enacted, and the left will fight you every step of the way. And the right, some moderate Republicans will fight you, or they'll make excuses. Why don't you wait? Do that in your second term. Why don't you take a smaller step? No. Go full steam ahead, get the changes done, get the education system back on track. And the last thing I would say to that is, the left has controlled our education institutions for decades. Then Republicans win elections and want to move the needle that much. No. You have got to drastically take the education system in a positive direction, or else you're not going to see any change. So you've got to come in, you've got to have an aggressive, offensive agenda, move the ball forward, communicate it to the public, engage parents, grandparents from all over the state, and then they will see your policies in action, and then you get to continue to build on it.
Bold colors, no pale pastels. Ryan Walters, you are definitely a bold colors kind of guy, and we appreciate that about you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it very much.
When we come back, we'll have a rational female opinion on JD Vance's childless cat lady comments. Don't go anywhere. A few weeks ago, we covered the media's attempt to memory hole Kamala Harris's role as the border czar in an attempt to portray Kamala as tough on immigration. However, now she's getting advice from a longtime far-left activist. Blaze Media's national correspondent, Julio Rosas, recently wrote a piece about this on Blaze News, and he joins us right now. So, Julio, spill the beans. Who's this far-left advisor? Who are we looking at?
So Frank Sherry, he's a longtime, some would say, open borders advocate. He had this organization within the United States, and the reason why I'm specifically saying the United States is because recently he just advised the UK's Labour Party on how to campaign on the issue of immigration, right? And similarly, although it's not a one-to-one comparison, the UK has their own immigration problem. It is slightly different because it is an island, and while they do have some people coming in on boats, the main way people come in is kind of similar with the Biden-Harris administration of flying people in to the country, and obviously a lot of British people are upset about that. And so Frank Sherry was recently tapped to advise the party and his think tank on how to campaign on the issue of kind of threading that needle of acknowledging that the problem exists, but not buying into the conservative party's framing of it. And so that's why it's significant, because Harris is trying to portray herself as being tough on the border, as someone who I just saw an ad that highlighted that she's a border state politician. And yet obviously the history of just her position as vice president has been absolutely atrocious on the border. And that's why you can't really believe what she's saying, because if she's being advised by someone like Frank Sherry, who at the very start of the administration went on C-SPAN and said, yes, this new administration has the right idea, has the right approach to the border. And then within a couple of weeks, we saw the explosion of illegal immigration that has been going on for a couple of years now.
Yeah, Julio, illegal immigration is one of the top issues for Americans. I think, along with the economy, people are very concerned about this migrant crisis. And I think that's why Kamala Harris is flipping on this issue, trying to act like she's tough on the border, when in fact, she has been in charge of this open border. To what extent do you think people will see through Kamala Harris's lies? And do you think they will kind of blame her for a lot of the Biden administration's failures when it comes to the border?
So I think it's going to be a bit of a mix, right? Because unlike the issue of the economy, where people have to buy groceries, every week and buy gas, the issue of immigration as a whole is a little bit harder to see unless you are directly impacted by, say, you have a shelter in your neighborhood. And so because that's not really happening all across the country, so I have seen some people, at least online, and take that with a grain of salt, kind of buy into the narrative that she and the Democratic Party has put forth, especially with this issue of, Trump, quote unquote, killed this very tough bipartisan Senate bill, which, of course, that was a mixed bag, and that was, anything but. They've been using that talking point over and over to try to rehabilitate her culpability in all this. But also at the same time, people know. People know that she is a part of this administration. People know that this isn't how things used to be prior to the Biden-Harris administration coming into power. And I really think that, as we get closer to November, we're going to see an uptick in activity, because right now it has kind of died down a little bit in terms of illegal crossings. But only just recently did they stop their mass parole program of flying people into the country. And that was because of a large number of instances of fraud, which, surprise, surprise, yes, that's going to happen when you expand a program that's not designed to be used in the way that they've been using it. So I think it's going to be a little bit mixed. I think the Democrats are desperate to try to seem tough on the border, and so they just hammered the talking point of, Trump killed this bipartisan bill. So I think, but at the same time, people have seen, and as I've reported on for the past couple of years, they've seen the videos of thousands of people crossing over at a single time. And that's something that's hard to explain away when you've been number two in this administration.
Well, once they get here now, Julio, they're here to stay, because we have new data that says that 90% of the migrants who enter the country illegally are now staying here. But I thought Joe Biden was saying that he was trying to crack down on some illegal immigration. We saw the executive order come out. So, Julio, why are they actually going against this right now?
Well, so that's the other half of the equation for this explosion of people coming in illegally, right? Because it has to be more than just the border being open, which it has been under this administration, because people have seen that not only has it never been easier to illegally enter the country, but it's never been easier to actually stay, right? Because the threat of deportation for decades has been something that the immigrant community, the illegal immigrant community, has been so afraid of because. Sure, you can get in, sure, you can sneak in and start establishing a life. But the fear has always been that if they catch you, you're going back home, right? But because of this administration has really deprioritized deportations as well. So even if they're part of this program that you're referring to, yeah, they have a 90% chance of actually being able to stay. So people just respond to incentives. I mean, that's just a basic human attribute. And so when people see, okay, we can get in very easily, and our chances of being able to stay in the country is the highest it's ever been. Of course, people are going to take that chance, and because for all intents and purposes, they're going to one that wins that bet. So that just once again proves that the Biden and Harris administration's tough talk about the border, immigration as a whole, it doesn't really mean anything because the actual actions and policies. Either they don't follow through, or as I just mentioned, it's plagued with fraud and tons of loopholes that people are able to take advantage of.
Yeah, this is just an atrocity. Every single illegal alien that has come in under the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris administration needs to be deported. We need mass deportations. This is something that Trump has talked about. One of his key points is mass deportations. How do you contrast that with Kamala Harris's message? Because she wants to seem a little bit more tough on the border, but of course is not going to use a lot of the language that Donald Trump uses when it comes to the border. And honestly, these people, they're going to become leftist voters. So we cannot go soft on this issue. So how do you think these two kind of takes on the border compare to one another? Of course, Donald Trump, tough on this issue, mass deportations, Kamala Harris, waffling. Of course, she's been open borders, but how do you compare the two?
Well, it's only been fairly recently, right? This change in tone and rhetoric from the Harris camp, because she was talking about there's that clip on The View from a couple of years ago where she said that we need to decriminalize illegal immigration, the crime of crossing the border illegally, instead of having it needs to be a civil issue as opposed to a criminal one in the eyes of the law. And again, that's why it's significant that, like I said, that ad recently said that she's a border state Democrat that's been tough on the border. But I think that unlike Harris, Trump actually has a record to more than just moving the needle within the party. It's a matter of he's actually did try to do things while he was in office, with building the border wall, having the Remain in Mexico policy, having the third country agreements that we had with the Northern Triangle countries in Central America, to further reduce that was actually further reducing the root causes, which is what Harris was supposedly in charge of, right? So you can't get rid of. You can't ignore that, right? You really can't. Politicians talk all the time, and it's true for anybody, but especially when it comes to this issue, it's like, okay, who actually did what with the power that they had at the time? The border has been an issue for a very, very long time. I'm not saying that it was 100% perfect under Trump, but having been to the border since 2019, and talking to people who have lived there and worked there their entire lives, they will always tell you that we were trending in the right direction under Trump. And then on day one, it completely unraveled under this current administration, and it's only gotten worse since. So again, when you look at the people who actually see it for what it is and what it has been, I don't think people are going to really buy the Harris rebrand, at least when it comes to independent voters. Obviously, the left leaning, they will probably buy into it because they're desperate, right? They were looking at losing the re-election with Biden. Yeah. But this issue is definitely not going to go away anytime soon.
Julio, we are out of time, but thank you so much for the update. We appreciate you every single time.
Thanks.
One man's fight to put Bible in classrooms meets stark resistance. Ryan Walters will join us to explain why the left hates putting Bibles in school. Stay tuned.
Saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Who knew this election cycle would be centered around childless cat ladies? But Danielle, here we are. So I want to talk to you about this because this has been absolutely everywhere. So when you look at this, we know Donald Trump doesn't do as well with women. So JD Vance, in his comments, do you think that these will help or hurt their chances with suburban women?
Yeah, well, thanks for your question, Jill. I feel like Donald Trump is gaining ground with Black voters, Hispanic voters, many demographics. Now, when we're talking about women, I think married women overwhelmingly vote more Republican. They're more conservative. They do share much more of those family values. They care about what happens to their kids and so on. Unmarried women are voting for Democrats. It's unfortunate, but I think that JD is going to rile up the base. I think he's going to get a lot of our side out. I think he's going to motivate many suburban women who are married, and I think many women maybe who aren't married who do want to have kids, maybe who see a future there. So I don't think that we've isolated women for sure, but the cat ladies, if you're a single cat lady, you are probably voting for Kamala Harris, let's be honest. So I don't think JD said anything that we don't already know.
Taylor Swift is a single cat lady, and she is probably most definitely going to be voting for Kamala Harris. But when you look at this, again, this has taken up a lot of space in this election cycle. Why do you think that this topic has struck such a nerve with people?
My goodness. Well, I think the left jumped on it immediately. A lot of these people that apply in this situation, which isn't actually that many people, how many childless cat ladies are there? Honestly, there are very few. And so they're so triggered, I think, because they're not comfortable in their decision in this kind of lifestyle. I think that they secretly maybe wish that they had kids. They wish their life was different. And so they're just very triggered by it. Because if you are comfortable in your own skin, if you're happy with the way that your life is going, I don't think you'd find it that triggering. If someone said, hey, Danielle, I'm doing this, but you're doing that, I'd say, oh, okay, great. I'm very happy having kids. I'm happy with my life the way it is. So I just don't think I'd be that triggered by someone who's doing something else. But I think they're very triggered by it because they know it's kind of a different way of life than what they're doing.
And they can get triggered by absolutely anything.
Oh yeah, the smallest things are triggering.
Danielle, thank you so much for sitting in with me today here on Blaze News Tonight. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Oh yeah, well, you can find me on social media. I'm at Danielle D'Souza Gill on all the platforms. You can get my thoughts on the childless cat ladies further on there.
Perfect. Now, if you want to follow more of Blaze News Tonight, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to rate and review the show. It definitely will help others to find this show. So that's going to do it for us here tonight on Blaze News Tonight. We will be back with you back here tomorrow night.